Hello, music and comic nerds of the internet. Today we are going to talk about where two of my favorite things of all time intertwine: comics and music.
Six in the morning.
I've been thinking about doing this video for a while. I may have even mentioned it in some of my other videos. This is something I've thought about for a long time because when I got into comics, it was literally because of music. And over the years, it has become obvious to me that the two are intertwined a bit. I'm super into punk, and it seems like a lot of creators of comics were also into punk. I actually had this conversation with James O'Barr, the creator of The Crow, at a Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and he agreed that a lot of people who are into weird music are also into weird forms of media, i.e. comics. So this one is dedicated to Ed Piskor, who is recently departed. That's one of his books there. And I will do a little tribute to him at the end, because obviously he did comics that were music related. So Ed did a YouTube channel called Cartoonist Kayfabe with a friend of his, Jim Rugg, and they would dissect comics. And I had gotten out of comics. I was out of comics for about at least a decade or more, maybe even 2 decades, where one day I was bored on YouTube and I decided I would see if I could find an interview with an artist named Tim Vigil, who would do comic books that were kind of extreme. He did Faust and he did some other stuff, and it was super, super graphic in every meaning of the word, graphic. And I started watching their other videos because they seemed like interesting characters. And it got me collecting comic books again. And I have been buying comic books again for, I don't know, it's been years. Pre-pandemic, for sure. So 4 years, 5 years, 6, 7, I don't even know. It's been a while. So let's talk about the first thing that I ever heard of that made me interested in comic books, aside from just buying comic books, because like when you were growing up in the 70s, 80s, and even to the 90s, there wasn't a lot of entertainment for you. There were video games that were not as interactive as the video games the kids have today, and there were movies that you didn't really have access to until the VCR came out, and even then, VCRs were expensive, and getting to a movie rental place was hard. So what you had were comic books. You can go, when your mom dragged you to the grocery store to do the shopping for the week, you could walk by the magazine rack and be like, oh, Spider-Man, that's cool. So, like every kid in America, I would do that. But there was something that piqued my interest at one point when the band Love and Rockets became popular. Do you remember that, when they were popular for like a week? When they put out that So Alive song? MTV, remember MTV? I think it's still around, but it's not doing what it used to do. They used to have those MTV News clips.
I'm Kurt Loder, this is MTV News.
And they would talk about different things going on, and one of the things was the band Love and Rockets, and they had mentioned in that segment that Love and Rockets had gotten their name from a punk rock comic book called Love and Rockets. And so I was like, I could like comic books that are about punk. And so this is not how Love and Rockets originally came out. It originally came out in magazine size, which this is not. This is small. And it's annoying that it's small. However, they recently did a larger sized version of Love and Rockets, the first 40 issues. First 40 issues were magazine size, and then they stopped doing it for a while, and then they started it back up again in a comic book size, and then they stopped doing that, and then they started doing it in like a trade paperback size, then they stopped doing that, and now they're currently doing a magazine size again. I used to have all of the originals, and then I sold them when I had kids, because again, I was out of comic books, and I didn't really think I cared. And now I wish I had them still. But they made these, which it really sucks. Like Fantagraphics, you suck for putting these out. So what they did is they kind of went through the different stories in Love and Rockets throughout all of them, and combined them in these little strangely sized books that suck, and they mixed up all the stories. And so one of the reasons they put out that box set was to put all of the issues in regular order with all of the context. But so Love and Rockets started off, well, I talked way too long on Love and Rockets, but it deserves it. So Love and Rockets started off as sort of a sci-fi soap opera sort of thing, and then eventually became a book about two punk rock girls living in California, Los Angeles, I presume. I don't remember. It's been a while. But as you can see, if you can see. So here's like the Rockets part, and then here's like the punk rock part. And so let's try this. So this is book one of the Love and Rockets that I would not recommend, I guess. But it's one of the only ways you can get Love and Rockets. So, like I said, it starts off with like sort of girls in space sort of thing, and then ends up where it's here's wrestling. They had a lot of different stuff going on in their books. And you would see like these characters that weren't quite human in the books. And eventually just became Maggie and Hopi doing punk rock stuff. Like here's an alien girl, I think. I assume. I don't know. Maybe she's just wearing weird... It's been a while. I should really go back and reread this. I haven't read any of this in so long that... I don't really know what I'm talking about anymore. But eventually, you get past all like sort of the sci-fi capery things, and you get to them in what would have been present day California. Like doing punk rock stuff. And so Jaime Hernandez has done a lot of covers, and Gilbert has done covers for punk bands as well. And I will show some of those here. The ones that stick out would be like the Ill Repute What Happens Next cover is probably my favorite. He did work with Aggression. He did work with Stalag 13. And Gilbert did a cover of Chemical People's The Right Thing, I think, is that. But yeah, so that's Love and Rockets. That was my introduction to the concept of music-related comic books. And then, I hadn't started collecting comic books, but then, in 1990, Glenn Danzig's band, Danzig? Glenn Danzig was also in a band called The Misfits, and Sam Hain. He released a home video where they had like little interviewee vignettes where they would talk about stuff, and he was talking about comic books. What are you reading, Glenn? Glenn?
Comics.
What kind of comics?
Wolverine.
Wolverine.
Yeah.
One of your favorites?
Yeah. Wolverine.
Kinda
Like
got
disguise, get the skeletons made out of unbreakable steel. Get these happening.
Yep.
Sideburns. But Wolverine. Real violent.
Is that what you like about it?
Yep. It's real heavy.
Violence is important, huh?
Yeah. Wolverine. What else? Wolverine. Animal Man's good.
Animal Man.
Yeah, it touches animals and gets their powers for a little while. This one's cool. It's got Wanna Beast in it. Mr. Monster. Happening. Just got these books before. This is a great comic by Michael Gilbert. Mr. Monster. This guy is like, whenever monsters come around, they call him. He's like, gets rid of them.
You have a large comic book collection?
Yeah,
How long have you been collecting?
since I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
Anyway, so he talks about, Mr. Monster, and he talks about Animal Man, and I think Wolverine, if I remember correctly. And if you know anything about Glenn Danzig, he got a lot from comic books. For example, that might look familiar to you. He stole that and used it for the logo for his band, Sam Hain and Danzig. And it came from Crystar Crystal Warrior, number 8. And the more you look at any of the stuff that Danzig did, any of the iconography of the Misfits, Sam Hain, or most of Danzig, I would say, it all was ripped off from other people. Like the Danzig font and the Sam Hain font, same font, was stolen from Giant Gila Monster, the movie poster, and like Walk Among Us, the cover of that was from some other horror movie, and the cover of Die Die My Darling was a comic book cover, and just every single, like the font of the Misfits that everyone knows is famous Monsters magazine font. So Glenn Danzig likes to reappropriate images. I saw this at a comic book store, so I had to pick this up because it was like Doyle comic book, which is pretty goofy. Like, he's just killing people. Gross. The art's pretty cool in this, actually, but Doyle is so goofy. I don't know. I'm sure Misfits collectors pay for this. I should probably sell it to one of them because it's stupid. And then I also found this recently. And when I say recently, I don't really mean all that recently. So it looks cool, right? Like, you're like, oh, that looks awesome. Number 121 of 250. And then you open it, and it's just, you're like, okay, maybe this is cool. Because this looks kind of cool. And then it's just like, what is going on? Like, what? What is this? What does this have to do with the Misfits at all? Like, is this guy supposed to be Glenn Danzig? But, like, why does he have a pompadour? Like, what is going on? And, like, this art is horrible, but, like, this house looks kind of, like, it's visually interesting, at least. And, I don't know, stuff happens. But, like, none of it seems Misfits related, like, at all. Oh, I guess that's Glenn. Glenn, don't leave me, man. Like, that doesn't look like Glenn. Oh, there's... Ignore that. This was so poorly drawn, I didn't realize it was a boob. I don't know. So that's horrible. And so Glenn Danzig, at one point, actually had a comic book company. still sort of in existence. But so here's some of the books that he did with that. The name of the comic book company was Verotic. This was the first series that they did, Verotica. That's issue 1, 2, 3. I'm missing 4 and 5, but here's 6. Here's 7. This is a newer one that they put out recently. Verotica Revenge. He also did a book called Satanica. That's issue 0. Issue 1. Issue 6. Here's another book that they did. So like Glenn Danzig wrote a lot of these. I think he may have wrote all of them, now that I'm thinking about it. So he basically paid a lot of pretty good artists to work with him. Like, so this is based on the Frank Frazetta painting. There's a couple of those, but like he got Simon Bisley to do that one. I'm guessing he paid Frank Frazetta a lot of money. Frank Frazetta has long since passed. But this was when Frank Frazetta was still alive. Jaguar God goes on forever. And then he was able to do Devilman. And I guess these are reprints. And then more Frank Frazetta, Death Dealer. And I can't exactly open these and show you what's inside because it is spicy. You couldn't tell by the name Verotic. There is erotic in Verotic for a reason. And maybe all that toxically masculine, over testosteroned, Verotic books aren't your thing. Maybe you're more into a love story. A nice love story between Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig. So this is the total omnibus version of Henry and Glenn Forever. Maybe you can see here. But those are all the artists. And you have basically a love story between Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig. You know. Something everyone wants to read about. It's good stuff. Link below. But so I think one of the originators of art and comic books in terms of like the punk rock thing, I think was probably the Ramones, in that Punk magazine, which, you know, they were tangentially affiliated with, you know, John Holmstrom doing art for the Ramones and him doing Punk magazine, where he was like a really interesting artist. So anyway, the Ramones put out this at some point. This is a box set of, I don't know, a bunch of songs, like, because the world doesn't have enough Ramones compilations. But what's cool about this, I keep this for two things. One, it has the lifestyle of the Ramones VHS on DVD, which is awesome. And then it also has this, which is worth keeping. It also has this, and it has this postcard. Let's try to dive into this a little bit, because there's some cool stuff in here. Oh, and then this, it might be interesting to someone. So there are some pretty cool artists in this. So here are the artists. As you can see, you have the aforementioned John Holstrom. You have Jordan Crane, who I love his art. Bill Griffin. You have Johnny Ryan. You have Jaime Hernandez. You have Sergi Aragones. That's a pretty good list right there. So this will not lay flat, but so this is the John Holmstrom part. This is the Jordan Crane part. Here's the Sippy the Pinhead and the Ramones. That's cool. Here's the Johnny Ryan part. Let's see here. Here's the part for the glasses. Here's the Jaime Hernandez part. Then you have the Sergi Aragones, which is just awesome. That's great. So you have the Ramones. And then there's also, more recently than that, Archie meets the Ramones. Because why not? I've never read this, but apparently the Ramones are... I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I think it's cool. It's also lame, but it's cool. It's lame and cool. Archie meets the Ramones. Then this was a book that came out. Jaime Hernandez cover. So this kind of talks about does a little bit of the origins of punk in CBGBs, and then I think turns into maybe something less non-fictional and turns into something more fictional. I don't know. So what else? Oh. So these are books I bought. I think I got them through mail order. The Sex Pistols. Revolutionary Comic Books was a company that would put out rock and roll based comic books. He also did other things, non-music related, but this is like the rock and roll comics. This is number 14, which is the Sex Pistols, which is, I think, the only one that I cared about. I don't think any of the other ones were interesting to me, at least at the time. Because they would do it on, like, I don't know, Winger or someone. I don't even know if they did a Winger one, but, that sort of, like Guns N' Roses or whatever. And so this is basically a biography of the Sex Pistols. And, like, the art isn't terrible, but it's also not great. But it's pretty cool. Not as cool as Barf. I also bought this from like the same place when I was a kid. I bet you I just stuck cash in an envelope and sent it to whoever was selling these. I don't even remember where I would have. Maybe in like a Thrasher magazine or something. I don't even know. Anyway. So this is like, this has aliens in it. So like we're already not doing a biography of the Sex Pistols unless they know something about aliens we don't. Like maybe John Lydon is an alien, I don't know. But like this, the art's horrible. Like this doesn't really look like any of the guys. Like maybe if you squint a bit, I don't know. So this one kind of sucks compared to the other one, which isn't even that great to begin with. Yeah. Yeah, the Sex Pistols comic books are cool, but have you ever seen an Accused comic book? How cool is this? This is awesome. I picked this up like recently, within the past year, I think, from someone. Comes with a flexi. And then this is like a bunch of different artists. And it kind of goes from Peter Bagg. I just noticed that. That's wild. Alright, we gotta get to that. So Peter Bagg did a comic book called Hate that I was really into it when it was coming out. So the art goes from really awesome to pretty bad. So this is where it's really awesome. This is right up my alley. This sort of stuff where it's just crazy monsters doing crazy monstrous things. That is what I love about comics. And then you get like, I guess, kind of cool stuff. Like this is still pretty cool. This is cool. Now we're kind of like, oh, okay. An interview with the accused. And then this is pretty poorly done. And then you have a Peter Bagg comic at the end here, which is awesome. Then I need to find this. Like, does this exist? Jim Woodring, Sam Keith, doing a Freaks comic book? What the hell? I need to find this. That looks awesome. So there is no band more comic booky than Gwar. So I used to have a Gwar comic book that came out from Last Gasp, I believe, which I sold because I think I got like $50 for it. I bought that in the mid-90s. So this book is kind of weird because there's not a lot of information about this, but the art's awesome. And I mentioned Death Piggy here, that's cool. This is after the death of Brocky, I would imagine. Oh, interesting. This is actually more of, now that I'm like kind of reading what it says, it's almost more of a biography than a book about like a fictional Gwar story. So that's cool. But like, I don't even know who put this out. Like, there's not a lot of information on it. It has a barcode, so I don't know. But then there's this one, which is definitely post-Brocky. And this is more cartoony. This is probably more of what you would want from a Gwar comic book, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. I like the other one better, but if you want to read a story about the intergalactic, fun, murderous rampage of Gwar, this is probably more up your alley. This you could probably still get. I'll probably put a link to this below on Amazon. You can pick this up. So I mentioned James O'Barr, and you're like, what does The Crow have to do with music? Well, so James O'Barr was very influenced by music. As you can see, he's wearing a big black shirt. This guy, this is not The Crow. And then I think this guy's name is Danzig, literally, like Glenn Danzig. Which, yeah, see. And then I think Glenn Danzig hated him for doing that. There's actually not a lot of James O'Barr work out there, sadly. Like, there's this story, and then there's The Crow. That might be about it. And then in The Crow itself, I think this is still available. I believe it's on Amazon. I'll link it below. So even in The Crow, there's, if you've never seen what The Crow comic book looks like, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the movie. So like, I think the aesthetic is based on Peter Murphy from Bauhaus. And then, again, here's another big black reference with Hammer Party. So also Joy Division references in here somewhere. Guy's wearing a Black Flag shirt. Has a Misfits logo on the back of his jacket. So, as I said, The Crow was highly influenced by music, as James O'Barr will tell you himself. And then, back in the 90s, we even had a band like Gashuffer, where they would, with their LP versions, would include a comic book that the members would actually create. And some of them are better at drawing than others. Like, not sure who is who here, but like this guy is better than some of them. Like than this guy. This guy's pretty bad. I can do better than that, and I haven't drawn anything in years. But it's just cool that they would bother doing something like this. I've shown these on my channel before. And honestly, this makes me look for their records. Because I like their music, but it's not enough for me to actually, like, listen to their music. Because it's sort of a vibe that I'm not always feeling. But I think it's awesome that they did comic books. And then even when they got signed to Epitaph, they were still doing comic books. Free comic book inside, and here it is. It actually has a cover now, so that's... But the art is still hit or miss. So far, it's all miss. And there's other comic book creators that would have music stuff in there. Like I mentioned, Hate, there was some stuff. He was based out of Seattle at the time, so it had, like, Gashuffer was actually mentioned in Hate. Even, like, Optic Nerve would have, like, a guy would be wearing, like, a Sam I Am shirt or something like that. And I would be remiss not to mention some comic writers that were once musicians. So 30 Days of Night, Steve Niles used to be in a DC hardcore band called Grey Matter, and then he was in a band called 3. And so 30 Days of Night is a semi-known comic movie. It's about vampires that go to Alaska and kill people for 30 days. He's done a lot of other comics as well. That's just the one he's most known for. And then the guy from My Chemical Romance also writes comic books. This is the one he's most known for, The Umbrella Academy. So that's cool. So that brings us to Hip Hop Family Tree. This was done by a man named Ed Piskor. He passed away recently due to... He removed himself from the planet, shall we say, for the YouTube algorithm, so they don't do whatever they do when you mention stuff they don't like. We won't get into all of the whys, all of the things that caused him to do that, because it's quite a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and I don't agree with a lot of them. I think he was unfairly treated, and he was not given the benefit of the doubt, and that sucks. And he basically watched his comic book career, which is the only thing he ever seemed to apparently really love, other than music, was comics. He loved comics more than music, I would imagine. And when that all got taken away due to some accusations, he didn't feel like he could live anymore. And so now he's gone. And that completely sucks, because he did some really interesting stuff. The first of which we'll go into is Hip Hop Family Tree. This is the thing he's probably most known for. This is how it originally came out, in this gigantic... Well, this is a box set of the two. I never opened this because after I bought this, they then put out an omnibus, which I will link below. It's currently sold out on Amazon, but it might come back in stock. They upped the price even though they don't have it in stock anymore. Or you could, like I believe I said, go to a comic book store and buy one. I'm sure Ed would appreciate that even more. Let's take a look at Hip Hop Family Tree number 1. The Treasury Edition, where this was taken from. As you can see, Ed did everything himself. And it basically goes through the history of hip-hop from the 70s up until the 90s, I believe, was where the book ended. As you can see, maybe it's not super apparent, this is sort of done in what would have been a comic book of my youth, where it was on like this low quality paper, which it's not. This is high quality paper. They just make it look low quality, where, you know, the color separations are off and all that fun stuff. So they kind of replicate that, which I'm somewhat ambivalent about. I don't know. I almost feel like I'd rather have it be clearer than have it be an homage to comics of the past. But let me know what you think about that. I'd rather... I can see where this is interesting visually, but I just don't know if it's worth doing. But Ed was also into punk a bit. Like, he would occasionally post drawings he would do of Black Flag or the Misfits. He would often talk about G.G. Allin. He actually talked about G.G. Allin in his, I would say note, but it was like a 4 or 5 page letter about why he was doing what he did, which I actually recommend if you care about this concept at all. Go and read it. It's kind of interesting and at some points even humorous. So this is another book that he did previous to Hip Hop Family Tree. This is WYSIWYG. It is about a computer hacker. And I believe this is out of print right now. So if you want this, you should probably go to a comic book shop, see if you can find it. Because you're not going to find it on Amazon. So that's WYSIWYG. And then Ed also did a book called Red Room. That was inspired more by stuff like Faust and other what they call outlaw comics, where they're grim and filled with violence. And so here's some of those. This is Crypto Killers #1, #2, #3, #4, randomly trigger warnings #2, and #4. And I didn't grab the rest of these out of my box because I couldn't find them easily because they were buried. But like, you can even see, like, this is the Danzig font. So Ed was definitely influenced by punk and hip hop, and he will be greatly missed. And it sucks, and there's nothing we can do about it, sadly. All I can suggest is maybe be kind to people, even if you don't agree with everything that they say or some of the things that they do. If they're not committing crimes, if they're not hurting people, maybe give them a little bit of grace, because you never really know what's going on in their heads, because the world is definitely a worse off place without Ed. Have a good day.
You know, Jimmy, you ever think you were going to be named next to Clive Barker?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's pretty good, the people that they did get some notes from.
Glenn Danzig, Gerard Way, Kevin Smith.
Yep.
That's fun, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. I bought my Faust at the first comic book store that I frequented regularly.
That's
I went
cool.
there for Image Comics, and I came home with an issue of Faust.
Amazing. If you're good to go, I'm good to go, Jimmy.